editing the video to fit a narrative. In moments, we're going to hear from both sides, filmmaker Jason Pollock and St. Louis County Prosecutor Martha Maccallum. But first, Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom with the newly unedited footage that was released just hours ago. Trace.
Hey, Martha, let me just go back and start with that documentary video which shows Michael Brown visiting that convenience store just after 1 o'clock in the morning, which was several hours before he was accused of robbing the very same store. If you look, you can see Brown grab some drinks and ask for cigarillos. And when the clerk bags the sodas and mini cigars, Michael Brown places something on the counter. The filmmaker, Jason Pollock, says it's marijuana and that Brown is making a trade. And it appears the clerks pick up whatever Brown put down and they look at it and they smell it. Jason Pollock then goes on to say, here's what really happened. Listen.
Mike traded the store a little bag of weed and got 2 boxes of cigarillos in return. He left his items at the store and he went back the next day to pick them up. Mike did not rob the store.
St. Louis County Prosecutor, the St. Louis prosecutor calls the filmmaker's claim, quote, just stupid and nonsense, saying the poorly edited snippet leaves out critical context. So we went back. We looked at the entire video sequence, and it was edited, and it did leave out context. For example, the filmmaker did not show the clerks talking to Michael Brown, clearly debating whether to make a trade for whatever he put on the counter. And the filmmaker did not show the clerks taking back the sodas and the cigars and putting them back on their shelves. The lawyer for the convenience store says Brown tried to barter, but he failed. Listen to him.
This is the argument that's going on between Michael Brown and the clerks. What do you mean, you won't barter with me? What do you mean I can't trade with you? Why not? Come on, man. The language got heated and it got ugly.
The filmmaker stands by his claim that the footage would have changed the narrative that Michael Brown was shot after robbing a convenience store. Police say it was irrelevant because Officer Darren Wilson didn't stop Michael Brown for robbery. He stopped him for walking in the middle of the street. Martha.
Thank you, Trace. Joining me now, the filmmaker behind Stranger Fruit, Jason Pollock. Jason, good to have you here. Good evening to you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
I am simply stunned by that report. Simply stunned.
All right,
beautiful job. Fake News 101.
Hold on. I have a question for you, okay? Because to me, what are you proposing legally? It makes no difference whether a robbery happened or a trade for pot happened or whether a bank got robbed or he was home doing his homework. What matters is what happens in the street when he and Officer Wilson encounter each other. So why have you focused so heavily on what happened in the convenience store?
That's a very interesting way to phrase this, because I completely agree with you. And the reason we put out this convenience store tape now is so that people could get it, because he didn't rob the store. And anyone that sees the exchange that takes place with a conscience, a heart, 2 minds, and is not a bigot pretty much understands what happened. Unfortunately, there's some people in America with so much bias inside of them that they just want to think that Michael Brown is a bad guy. But yes, let's talk about the physical evidence on Canfield.
They think perhaps that Michael Brown is a bad guy because 40 FBI agents went to Ferguson to investigate this case at the behest of Eric Holder, who showed up almost immediately after it happened. I think it's fair to assume that they really believed that they were going to be able to indict Officer Wilson, that he had acted wrongly.
No, I don't think that that's absolutely not true. Not true. Don't just say that.
No. You're just saying plenty of things. So let me just throw one thing. The FBI agents went down there. Eric Holder went down there.
To indict Darren Wilson? Darren Wilson? No way. You know how the system works. These cops get off every single time. Bob McCullough has been the prosecutor for over 2 decades. And for 23 years. Excuse me. Let me just finish this. For 23 years, according to the Washington Post, there has not been a prosecution of a single police shooting in St. Louis County.
So you believe, hold on, now it's my turn.
Single one of them? None of them are indictable?
It's my turn. You're suggesting that 40 FBI agents were all in cahoots.
I'm suggesting the Department of Justice failed.
That this person was not indicted. Listen to me.
They failed.
So It's not possible. It's not possible in your brain that what happened there was what was found by both a grand jury and 40 FBI agents. You're discounting. You're saying all of that doesn't matter. Their investigation is absolutely not true.
When
Michael
the facts
Brown
of
did
this
not
case
reach
come out,
into that
when the
car
facts of
to
this
grab
case,
his
excuse me,
gun.
miss, can I speak now? When the facts of this case come out in my film, Stranger Fruit, the facts of this case. The facts of this case that Bob McCullough doesn't want us talking about. Like the fact that Michael Brown was shot in the head and a bullet came out of his eye. Do you know how that would happen? When your head is down and there's a bullet in the ground. In their report, there's a bullet in the ground by Michael Brown's head. Now, how would a bullet go through here, out of his eye, and then get stuck in the ground?
What I know is that there were 3 different forensic investigations that were done that showed that he was shot in the front.
They failed him.
Everyone in the country was told this narrative that he was shot in the back, that he had his hands up and said, "Don't shoot."
You know how many black men are in jail right now? You know how many black men are in jail right now for nothing? For nothing? Because the Department of Justice failed them? You know how many black men are in jail right now? Don't tell me because they closed the book on it. We're okay. My film will show the public the truth, ma'am. And if you want to know the truth, you should watch it.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why you got so hung up on what happened, whether he was trading pot or trading or stealing something is completely irrelevant to the outcome of this case. Joining me now to respond to this is Bob McCullough, who you just heard mentioned. He's the St. Louis County prosecuting attorney, and I would imagine that he has a response to a very heated Jason Pollock. Good evening, sir. Good to have you here. What do you think?
Well, good evening. I'm happy to be here. Well, he has his facts wrong, not shockingly. There was no bullet in the ground anywhere near Michael Brown. There are 3 separate medical examiners, including one hired by the Brown family, the Department of Defense, and the St. Louis County medical examiner all came to the same conclusion. He's making up facts as he goes along to push his film. You know, he's an amateur filmmaker, and he's just making things up to do that. You look at the entire
Is it true that no police officer has ever been prosecuted for shooting an unarmed person in Ferguson, Missouri?
In Ferguson, yes. And in St. Louis County, I think is what you're asking with that. Over the years, there have been several shootings. All have been investigated, and none of them were indicted, correct?
So he's claiming that there were underhanded tactics, that things were hidden, that the story and the investigation that was done by 40 FBI agents, overseen by the Department of Justice and the grand jury, that they all were in cahoots with you to make sure that Darren Wilson was never indicted.
You know, I mean, that's just, listen to what you just said and tell me how silly that is. And it really is silly that somehow I have this control over the United States Department of Justice, the Attorney General of the United States, the FBI. It's just nonsense. And this guy's trying to push his movie, which is made up, makes up the facts on it. You saw the entire surveillance video from all 4 angles, unedited. And he's trying to strike a deal with them.
Is there any legal relevance to what happened in the, excuse me for interrupting, to what happened in the convenience store? I mean, it seems to me that the whole question begins in the street when these two, Darren Wilson and Michael Brown, confront each other, correct?
Well, it begins there, but it relates back to the incident at the store at about noon on that day, because that plays into this, and that became relevant to what went on in the street. What happened at 1 o'clock that morning was both logically and legally irrelevant and immaterial, which is why it was never presented to the grand jury. That's not something I'd ever be able to use in a trial had there been any kind of an indictment coming out of this. So it's not going to be presented to the grand jury. It is documented. This isn't new information. It's documented in the police report. The conversation the police had with the employees of the store, the fact that we issued a search warrant so they could get the surveillance video, that they looked at the surveillance video, examined it, documented that, described what's on that video in the police report, all of which was released November 24th, 2014. It's all been sitting there, open to the world, open to anybody who wants to look at it, including this fella.
All right, Bob McCullough, thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight, sir.